right? And these emails have seasonal greetings like, hope you have a good Christmas. Don't forget to send the retainer money. Love, Mike, right? I mean, they don't say that, but they're basically the same thing, like, happy Thanksgiving, send me my $35,000.
My wife has been most vocal on the subject of the pretzel monies.
Exactly.
Why aren't you getting the money?
Welcome to Law and Chaos. Today, we'll catch up on Donald Trump's trial in New York, which included some interesting witnesses for the prosecution. And then we've got a deep dive into a law enacted by Tennessee Republicans to ban chemtrails.
Which is wild because chemtrails do not exist.
Yeah. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get after it. Hey guys, I'm Liz Dye, and with me is Andrew Torres. Andrew, how are you?
I'm great, Liz. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be with you in the new format. I am so pleased that so many of you guys became paying subscribers and supported us and reached out and sent us nice messages about the new format. Thank you. It really means a lot to both of us.
Yeah, it really does. And if you want to see what it's all about, head on over to patreon.com/lawandchaospod or over at our Substack at lawandchaospod.com. And if you become a paying subscriber, you get not only the ad-free podcast episodes, but each one has extended content. Like last Friday's had, I don't know, about 15, 20 minutes of bonus deep dive stuff. We got a lot extra here today. It's something we do to show you guys how much we love you supporting the show. And thank you.
All right. So, Andrew, are you ready to talk about Donald Trump some more?
I would be ready to never talk about Trump again, but it is our job.
It is indeed. All right. So before we start, just a congratulations and mazel tov to our former president who got himself held in contempt of court again on Thursday morning. We will, of course, link to the order in the show notes. But once again, he got just a $1,000 fine, which is, it's functionally nothing for a billionaire. And look, last week, the court promised to throw him in jail if he continued to violate the gag order. So,
yeah, a certain podcast promised you that was going to happen.
I know.
What gives?
But we did. I will say we did mention that there might be this kind of other thing going on. So let's talk about what, because a lot of people are pissed. Like, okay, if the court said you're going to jail, like how many more last chances is he going to get? I don't think that's right.
I don't think that's right at all. And let me say, I absolutely get the frustration, right? But there are some very important facts here, right? First and foremost, the DA's office only asked for the $1,000 fine, right? So yes, lock him up already. I'm with you, but you can't get mad at the court for not awarding something the prosecutors didn't ask for. And I don't think you could argue that the prosecutors are secretly in the tank for Trump, right?
No.
And secondly, look, it remains a Rubicon to cross to incarcerate a former president. That's not a thing we've ever done in our nation's history. I am on record, incorrectly, I think now, as saying I didn't think that would happen at all without a conviction, by a jury of his peers. And now I think it might. So, look, we should not be surprised that everyone involved is taking this very seriously and proceeding carefully.
Yeah. All right. So look, we touched on this in the last episode, why we thought that this contempt hearing was not going to result in incarceration. But let's spell it out. The district attorney moved to show cause on the first 10 violations of the gag order on April 15th and April 18th. It was across two show cause motions. The court set a hearing on those first 10 violations for the 23rd and ruled a week later on the 30th. In that ruling, Justice Merchan ruled explicitly that if there were further violations, he was going to have to put Trump in jail because the only two options were $1,000 fine per violation or a cell, and that's a paltry fine that they're going to cut it with a billionaire. But before that happened, this is the essential timing thing, Trump kept on running his mouth. And so on the 25th, the district attorney filed a third show cause order with respect to 4 more potential violations of the gag order. Those violations were not considered at the hearing on the 23rd. They were addressed on May 2nd. And so the violations that were addressed in the May 2nd hearing predated Justice Merchan saying, next time, asshole, you are going to jail.
Right. Which is why the DA's office only asked for the fine. And We should add on top of it, right? Like of those 4 latest violations, the 4 latest statements, the DA's office lost on 3 of them.
Right. So, okay, 2 of those statements had to do with Michael Cohen. They were sort of sniping at Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen has been sniping at Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has said, like, look, he started it. And the court has kind of signaled that if the witnesses are going to shit talk, then he can't really stop Donald Trump from shit talking.
Shut up, Michael Cohen.
Yes. And then the other violation was Trump saying something along the lines of Pecker is a really nice guy, David Pecker. He's one of the witnesses. We're actually going to talk about him in a minute. But the prosecutor said, well, that is kind of an implicit threat, like better stay nice or else. And
and coming from Trump, it definitely reads that way. They're like, honestly,
didn't read that way to me. Did not read that way to me at all. Sorry.
I'm not mad. No. But I'm not mad about losing on that because it's a coming out of anyone else's mouth who isn't, a mafia boss. I would agree with you, but, I certainly read it with malicious intent, but, reasonable people could disagree, I guess.
So the 4th statement, though, was an attack on the jurors and saying, like, they're 95% Democratic and they're totally in the tank. And that's not a thing. So that was another violation. There's clearly a violation of the gag order. And Justice Merchan was like, we're done here. And so this is what he said, because I think it's clear that, like, now we are at the last chance. Yeah. He said, as stated in its decision and order of April 30th, 2024, criminal contempt is punishable by a fine not exceeding $1,000, by jail not exceeding 30 days, or by both in the discretion of the court. The judiciary law permits this punishment to protect the dignity of the judicial system and to compel respect for its mandates and to punish the contemner for disobeying a court order. Because the offensive statement was made prior to this court's decision of April 30th, and because the people are seeking only a monetary fine, the court will once again fine defendant $1,000. However, because this is now the 10th time that this court has found defendant in criminal contempt spanning 3 separate motions, it is apparent that monetary fines have not and will not suffice to deter defendant from violating this court's lawful orders. Therefore, defendant is hereby put on notice that if appropriate and warranted, future violations of its lawful orders will be punishable by incarceration.
Yeah, and that is very serious, right? Judges are not in the habit of, like, if you kids don't behave that back there, I will turn this car around. I'm only going to say that 11 more times, right? Like, no, when a judge says, I will put you in jail if you do X, you better not do X. And look, Trump has complied with the order after that statement, right? I mean, I don't know that he's going to stay reined in, but.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because I have a friend who put this question to me. Do you think that Trump is trying to get himself thrown in jail here as some sort of, like, martyr himself for the campaign?
No, but what I think he's trying to do is, have a measuring contest with the court, right? He did the exact same
contest. I don't know. No, okay, I got it. I worked it out.
Yeah, look, he did the exact same thing, right, in front of Justice Engoron, and essentially, walked away on top, right? Waltzed in, had no agreement, didn't testify, monologue, dropped the mic, walked out. And
I mean, he did have like $450 million in fines, so I'm not sure that that's walking away on top. But yeah, I take your point, right? Yeah. I don't think he's trying to get himself thrown in jail. I just think he's so unused to any consequences that it doesn't occur to him. But look, he's taken the offending posts down as instructed, and he's more or less reined it in. I think he's not trying to get himself thrown in jail. I think he might do it. Yeah. And I think his attorney, Alina Habba, going out and saying the same things and attacking the jury I think that's a risk.
There's a great bit in the David Kelly movie From the Hip, which is a Judd Nelson vehicle, right? In which he's the young hotshot lawyer, and the cantankerous judge on the bench is there. He's supposed to be being supervised by a senior partner, and is like, every time he, and points at Judd Nelson, mouths off, I want you to put that contempt on him, and points to the senior partner. And I would love it if Trump has to go to jail because Alina Habba is stupid on Newsmax.
She really, yeah, she's. Look, the gag order says specifically Trump and his agents are barred from making statements that violate the gag order. Alina Habba is his lawyer and also the legal spokesperson for his PAC. So it's very clear that she falls into that
She's
category.
Twice a lawyer.
I don't want to get into that math. Anyway, all right, so we got a lot to talk about. Let's move to the trial itself, because a week ago, David Pecker testified for parts of 4 days. He is the former CEO of American Media, which is the parent company of the National Enquirer. And I think we all know what he did. He participated in this catch and kill agreement where he bought stories which were damaging to Donald Trump to protect Trump in the campaign. And at some point, David Pecker decided that he was violating campaign finance laws by making
which he was,
right? He was making functionally an in-kind contribution to the campaign. So he refused to do the deal with Stormy Daniels. And that's why Michael Cohen stepped in and fronted the money, which he had to be reimbursed, which is the subject of this prosecution. The district attorney needs Pecker to help him prove that Trump had an illegal purpose in making the payments to reimburse Cohen. Because Trump and his lawyers have argued that Cohen only paid off Stormy Daniels to protect Melania, and that's not illegal, right? That's not a campaign contribution. That's clearly not the case. Cohen and Trump could have paid off Stormy Daniels or Karen McDougal, the other woman, any time in the prior 10 years. Their sexual encounters with Trump took place in 2006, and nobody did anything about them until 2016. So Pecker was useful to the prosecutors because he corroborated that 5 minutes after Trump declared his candidacy, he called up Pecker and invited him to Trump Tower for this meeting with Michael Cohen. And they all three agreed that Pecker was going to be on the lookout for the women. And they agreed specifically that it was going to be a woman because everybody knew that's what Trump did. And that Pecker and AMI and, through the National Enquirer would buy up these women's stories and then Trump would later reimburse them or buy them or whatever, right? So Pecker's function is to connect the scheme to the campaign, right? To make it clear that they only did this whole thing for the purpose of the election. And Pecker did a good job of that, as did Keith Davidson, the lawyer for both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, these two women who sold their stories, right? Keith Davidson confirmed that Trump, in fact, stalled in making the payments to Daniels in hopes that he could string her out until after the election and then not pay her, which is what the prosecutors alleged in their opening statement.
$130,000, yeah.
Right. Because after the election, Trump wouldn't give a shit if Stormy Daniels told her story to every tabloid on earth because it wouldn't matter to him, right? He wasn't trying to protect Melania. He was trying to protect his electoral prospects.
Yeah. So I think the important thing that happened here is establishing motive, right? So the ADA, Joshua Steinglass, asks David Pecker, was your principal purpose in entering into the agreement with Karen McDougal to suppress her story so as to prevent it from influencing the election? And Pecker says, yes, it was.
Right. And then Trump also invited Pecker to the White House for a celebratory dinner where he said, how's Karen? How's our girl? And thanked Pecker for what he did, right? And Pecker said his wife wouldn't be attending, so maybe he shouldn't come. And Trump said, no, bring your business buddies. This is a dinner to thank you for what you did.
Yeah. And also, did you notice that Mrs. Pecker always seems to be, washing her hair, have popovers in the oven whenever Trump invites come around, right? Like they got asked to the inauguration, and Mrs. Pecker was like, look at the time, right? They got asked to a dinner at the White House, and Mrs. Pecker is like, screw you, Dave.
Yeah, so she did not accompany him on any of these things. I did notice that.
Good for her.
It's funny, but it's also like, back in 2017, when most of this stuff went down, in 2016, literally no one in this story was like, oh, hey, Donald Trump will make such an amazing president. Like, so glad we played a role in making that happen, right? None of them thought he was going to win.
No, and these are his lifelong friends, right? It was that hilarious text exchange between Pecker's deputy, a guy named Dylan Howard, you'll hear more about him, and Keith Davidson on election night in 2016, where they realized Trump was going to win, and they had that same feeling that all of us had, right? Like, Davidson texts Howard and says, what have we done? And Howard responds, oh my God, right? Like, because they knew damn well that Trump would have lost if they'd have just let Stormy Daniels tell her story publicly. Or I guess there's the other, like when Davidson joked that he wanted Trump to, throw in an ambassadorship for me, right? Like, I'm thinking the Isle of Man, right? And the prosecutors are like trying to make this joke make sense for the jury. And they're like, why the Isle of Man? And Davidson's like, it was a joke, dude. Like, I'm pretty sure we don't have an embassy on the Isle of Man. Like, of course not.
Yeah. You want to talk about Davidson's testimony now before we get to Hope Hicks? Because that was some extremely wild stuff. It was a little racy.
Yeah. I guess just before we leave Pecker, and okay, I'm still 12. That will never not be funny.
Nice.
Right?
That name will never not be funny.
Let's just mention that Trump's lawyer, Emile Beauvais, got him to admit on cross-examination that he'd done catch-and-kill deals for other politicians, right? Like notably Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So Pecker apparently buried stories of Schwarzenegger's infidelities in exchange for exclusives and fitness articles by Schwarzenegger. And the point of this was both to suggest that it was normal business practice for the National Enquirer to buy up stories, and that doing so was not a campaign contribution. Because remember, the state's theory is that these misdemeanor false business records charges get bumped up into felonies because they were done to cover up another crime. And that other crime, well, at least one potential other crime, the one that they're leaning the hardest into is campaign finance violations. So Steinglass came back on redirect and was like, you took an immunity deal from special counsel Robert Mueller and admitted to campaign finance violations because you were pretty sure if you didn't, they were going to charge you with campaign finance violations, right? And Pecker was like,
Yeah, and actually on top of that, the reason he didn't do the Stormy Daniels deal and backed out of the Karen McDougal deal was because his lawyers were like, hey, dude, campaign finance violation. Don't do that.
Yep,
but
it's a thing of value. Absolutely.
Yep. So, okay, let's get to Keith Davidson because that guy is so incredibly sleazy. Like he's been in all kinds of nasty shit his whole career. He was involved in the Hulk Hogan sex tape deal. And actually, he was investigated by the feds for possibly trying to extort Hogan. He was in the mix when Charlie Sheen's HIV status got leaked. And like, think what you want about Charlie Sheen, but not okay.
Yeah.
The singer Tila Tequila alleged that Davidson tried to extort her using a sex tape that she'd made with her boyfriend.
Gross. And relevantly here, Davidson represented Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, and while representing them, seemed awfully chummy with opposing counsel Michael Cohen, right? Like, and the agreement that he drafted that's at the center of all of this. Well, let's just say I would not have let any of my clients sign a deal like that, let alone drafted one. It's just not in their best interest.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that he was working both sides of the street in these deals.
Yeah.
Pecker, the CEO, testified that Dylan Howard, his lieutenant, considered Davidson a major source and didn't want to alienate him, even as Davidson was ostensibly representing Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal against AMI.
Yeah. So the upshot is that the prosecution got Davidson to admit that the Stormy Daniels settlement agreement was probably unenforceable because it would have made her pay $1 million per breach. And I'm doing the Dr. Evil on that. Even though she only got $100, not as good as you, but I'll do my best. Even though she only got $130,000 in total settlement, right? Like, and that supports the notion that it was Trump who oversaw the whole deal, because why would anybody else have as their primary goal, like being absolutely certain that none of the story was ever going to come out?
Right. And Cohen was the one who got him to insert that in there.
Exactly. And so if you're a Patreon supporter over at patreon.com/lawandchaospod, you'll get an extended discussion of Davidson's testimony. You'll hear about liquidated damages. We're going to do a deep dive on that. And you'll get no ads. If not, we'll be back after we pay some bills.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about Hope Hicks, because I have a lot of feelings about her testimony. And I guess I should mention that she testified Friday and the transcript is not up yet, so we're going to have to go on news reports and tweets. But let's talk about what she gave the prosecutors first before we talk about her white girl weepies. So first, she can.
I'm so glad that's your line.
Right. From one Karen to another. Okay. So first, Hicks confirmed that there was panic inside the Trump campaign when the Access Hollywood and Karen McDougal stories broke in the summer and fall of 2016. It is very clear from Hicks's testimony that the campaign treated this as a campaign issue, not like an issue of Trump's marital or family status, right? She talked about forwarding some of these stories to like Jared Kushner, right? And, if you were trying to keep it from the family, you probably would keep it from the family. Trump wasn't really doing anything to protect Melania, although at one point he did ask the butlers to intercept the newspaper delivery so that Melania wouldn't see the Wall Street Journal with Karen McDougal on the front cover.
Sure, I love the idea that Trump was thinking that, Melania wouldn't find out if he swiped the newspaper, right? Like, I don't know. Is she that out of touch? Like, maybe she doesn't even know about the trial. Like, she just thinks he's been at a golf course for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, that would explain her, lack of presence in the courtroom. But she did send me a very personalized email saying that I should donate to her husband's campaign as a birthday present to her, since her poor husband is locked in court by a mean judge. So I guess she found out about the trial. So, okay, let's read this goofy exchange where Trump tries to tell Hicks that Michael Cohen just paid Stormy Daniels off in secret and never told anyone out of the goodness of his heart. He's just a good Samaritan that way. Okay, I'll be Hope Hicks, obviously. I believe it was the morning after Michael had given a statement to the New York Times saying that he had, in fact, made this payment without Mr. Trump's knowledge. President Trump was saying he spoke to Michael and that Michael had paid this woman to protect him from a false allegation, and that Michael felt like it was his job to protect him, and that's what he was doing. And he did it out of the kindness of his own heart. He never told anybody about it, and he was continuing to try to protect him until the point where he felt he had to state what was true.
And this is what President Trump told you Michael Cohen said to him.
That's right.
How long had you known Michael Cohen by that point?
3.5 years.
And the idea that Mr. Cohen would have made a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels out of the kindness of his heart, was that consistent with your interactions with him up to that point? And then there's an objection from Trump's lawyer, Emile Beauvais, and the court overrules that.
Yeah. I would say that it would be out of character for Michael.
Why would it be out of character for Michael? Then there's another objection also overruled.
I didn't know Michael to be an especially charitable person or a selfless person. He's the kind of person who seeks credit.
Did Mr. Trump say anything else about this issue when he told you that Michael made the payment?
Just that he thought it was a generous thing to do and he was appreciative of the loyalty. That's all I remember.
Very, very nice crocodile tears there.
Yeah. And then Hicks admitted that Trump had said in 2018, when the Daniels story broke, words to the effect of, what a relief it is that this stuff is coming out now and not back in 2016 when it would have actually mattered, which obviously reinforces the prosecutor's position that, of course, he paid these women off because of the election and not for his family. So here's Hicks again. He wanted to know how it was playing and just my thoughts and opinion about this story versus having the story, a different kind of story before the campaign, had Michael not made the payment. And I think Mr. Trump's opinion was it was better to be dealing with it now and that it would have been bad to have that story come out before the election. Really? You think so? Is that what you think, Hopi girl? And that brings us to the crying.
The crying. Yeah, you and I talked about this, and you were like, I have feelings about the crying.
I have a lot of feelings about the crying.
Yeah.
But, okay,
Yeah.
What happened was that Trump's lawyer, Emile Beauvais, got up to cross-examine Hicks, and she got all weepy and had to, take a break and go outside and collect herself. And then she came back, and Beauvais asked, 3 questions, and that was the end. She said Cohen wasn't a part of the campaign. He still volunteered, and that he used to call himself a fixer or Mr. Fix-It, but it was only because he first broke it that he was able to fix it, after which Beauvais excused her. But look, okay, here's my issue.
I'm calling in the wolf. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Here is my issue with Hope Hicks. This woman is a communications professional. She's a lot younger than I am, but she's been doing this 10 years. She is not a child, right? She worked for Donald Trump, somebody who constantly berates everyone around him. We have seen the text that she sent during the January 6th insurrection, during the riot, right? She wasn't saying, I am so terrified for my country. She sent texts to Ivanka's chief of staff that were like, we're all screwed. We're never going to get jobs. This is going to ruin everybody's career. And I'm so upset about it. I could spit, or I don't think she used the word spit, but you understand
I don't think she used the word screwed either. But
yeah. I mean, I don't believe for a second that she's this shrinking little flower that was so rattled by having to testify that she got the weepies and had to be excused. Cut the crap, I mean, I'm a skinny white lady too, not as tall and skinny as she is, but still girl, I know what game you're playing. We all know what game you're playing.
All right.
And then today, Monday, as we are recording this, they had the former Trump Organization controller, Jeff McConney, to testify on the witness stand. He's been a He's been a fixture in all of the Trump trials. In the civil fraud trial, he was found to have helped fabricate the false financial docs, along with the Trump Organization's CFO, Alan Weisselberg. And then they were both barred from holding fiduciary positions. I think Weisselberg for sure had to disgorge some of his retirement pay because Justice Engoron ruled that it was basically a bribe to keep him on side in his testimony.
And it worked.
Yeah, it did. And indeed, McConney said that he is now retired, but the Trump Organization is paying for his lawyers here. He also participated in the tax fraud to pay Weisselberg off the books, which McConney wasn't charged in, but Weisselberg got 3 months in Rikers Island for. So in this trial, he was brought to testify kind of to corroborate the internal Trump Organization documents. So McConney testified about this meeting in January of 2017 where the Trump finance guys, the internal, controllers of the company, were trying to work out how to get Cohen paid off. So they sit down with their Trump-branded notepads, I shit you not, and, they take all our notes, right? So the prosecutor sticks a piece of paper under McConney's nose, and he says, is this Alan Weisselberg's handwriting? And McConney's like, uh-huh. And it shows $180,000 representing the $130,000 payment plus the $50,000 expense, which was to pay the online poll rigger. And the written notation in Weisselberg's handwriting says, grossed up to $360,000, additional bonus $60,000. And there's a lot more testimony like Weisselberg can't write the checks because he only has $10,000 check writing authority, and these are going to be, $35,000 checks. But come on.
Yeah, and look, this is walking through the elements of the fraudulent entry here, right? Because if these were actual checks for actual legal services, you don't double them so that you essentially have that amount after taxes, right? You needed to get Michael Cohen a net of $180,000. But if you just write him a check for $180,000, he's going to declare that as regular business income, right? And so you double it so that after federal, state, local taxes, it comes out $180,000. Oh, and they added in an additional bonus of $60,000 as a cherry on top for. Well, I don't know. All I can say is my clients routinely do not just throw in an additional $60,000 on their legal bills. Not that I would object if they wanted to do that.
Right. I mean, you don't get a bonus on top of your retainer. That's not how a retainer goes. No. Okay. So then in February, McConney sends Cohen an email saying, send me those invoices that you spoke to Alan about, right? Alan Weisselberg, right? And then Cohen sends him an email saying, pursuant to our retainer agreement, kindly remit payment for services rendered for the months January and February 2017. And you will note that there is no number in that email, right? That it's like remit payment for services rendered. What services? How much? Doesn't say. So
yeah. Also not how lawyers do things.
Right. So Colangelo makes McConney authenticate all 11 emails because the January and February, so that was one that was going to be a $70,000 check, right? And these emails have seasonal greetings like, hope you have a good Christmas. Don't forget to send the retainer money. Love, Mike, right? I mean, they don't say that, but they're basically the same thing. Like, happy Thanksgiving. Send me my $35,000.
My wife has been most vocal on the subject of the pretzel monies.
Exactly.
Why aren't you getting the money? Okay. And then McConney testifies that he never saw any retainer agreement with Michael Cohen, right? And that it would have been standard procedure for lawyers to send their bills to the legal department. Oh, and then also after the third payment from the Donald J. Trump Trust account, they switched to Trump's personal account, which dispersed the final $315,000 as, quote, non-employee compensation.
Yeah.
All of which is conveniently documented in the copious notes they took because the Stringer Bell rule has a secret codicil that says, okay, take notes on a criminal conspiracy on corporate branded letterhead even. It's fine as long as you keep them, I don't know, like in a desk drawer with one of those old-timey locks on it or something.
Yeah, that's what they did. They kept this secret ledger locked in the desk drawer. Okay, that's enough of Donald Trump, and we will be back with our second story after this ad break.
Okay, Liz, our second story begins on a rolling meadow in Upper Saxony in 1209.
Well, I think many of your fans would be delighted.
Actually, it begins with the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022. right? Which
Okay.
that's the budget bill that, funds the government. That one in particular was 1,068 pages long. It passed the House 361 to 69 and the Senate 68 to 31, which you look for 2022 counts as wildly bipartisan. Right? And that's important because one of the things that this bipartisan budget bill did was require the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, with support from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, to provide a research plan for solar and other rapid climate interventions, including a specific directive that OSTP develop a research governance framework to provide guidance on transparency, engagement, and risk management for publicly funded work in solar geoengineering research. And I know, a lot of stuff. Solar geoengineering is a really cool thing, right? It means efforts to reflect sunlight away from the Earth, right, so that it's cooler to help combat global warming, right? And since global warming's pretty dire, right? Like there are a lot of potential options on the table. And some of them are a little bit science fiction-y, right? Like my personal favorite is the one where NASA would send, I swear to God, I'm not making this up, mirrors the size of Brazil into space to reflect sunlight away from the Earth, right?
Why Brazil?
I don't know. That's just how it's described in like 3 separate news reports. I love it. And if you're not hearing Monty Burns saying, "Since the dawn of time, man has yearned to blot out the sun," you're not the listeners that I know.
I'm not.
Okay. But this particular report is not about the Brazil-sized mirrors. Right? Instead, it's about somewhat more modest research. And these take place in the atmosphere itself, not in outer space, right? But the key thing to remember is that these are still largely like science fiction-y kind of things, right? So they're things that might be possible, right? Like injecting aerosols into the upper stratosphere or really, like brightening the clouds that float over the ocean so they reflect more sunlight back into space, right? And so one of those sci-fi proposals is a thing called CCT, or cirrus cloud thinning, right? And cirrus clouds are those thin, wispy little clouds, right? They're formed out of ice high in the upper atmosphere. Right? And here's the thing. Like all clouds, cirrus clouds reflect sunlight away from the Earth, right? And that has a cooling effect. Also, at the same time, they absorb invisible infrared radiation coming off the planet, and so they trap it. That warms the Earth, right? And the difference, though, is all the other clouds that you see in the sky have a net cooling effect on the atmosphere. That is, they reflect more visible light away than infrared radiation that they absorb, except for cirrus clouds because they suck, right? They're thin and wispy, right? And so
there's no moral dimension to cirrus clouds. This slander will not stand.
But they increase the net temperature of the Earth, right? And that's a feedback loop, by the way, because as the Earth gets hotter, warmer climate produces more cirrus clouds.
Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe they do suck. No, they don't. They're just clouds.
Okay. But that's what CCT is all about, right? So the idea is, I should be laughing, right? Like, the idea is you would use drones to seed the clouds with bismuth triiodide, ice nuclei, right, in the upper troposphere. And that will change the way the clouds form and grow. It makes them less dense and more likely to dissipate, less likely to retain infrared radiation. And yes, I realize this sounds like the plot of a Vonnegut novel, right? But apparently, like, bismuth triiodide is cheap. It's non-toxic.
Oh, I got a jar in my medicine cabinet right now.
Sure. So, okay. Nevertheless, right, the story so far, Congress demands that the Biden administration's Office of Science and Technology Policy release a report about these kinds of things, right? And I think the Biden administration knew, right, it was going to maybe get some pushback. So when they released the report, right, they were very careful to say this was something Congress made them do. And here, I'll quote the language directly. This report does not signify any change in policy or activity by the Biden-Harris administration. There are no plans underway to establish a comprehensive research program founded on solar radiation modification. So no ICE 9 for now.
Oh, they would say that, wouldn't they? That's what they said about Jade Helm.
Okay. But nevertheless, like, you'd think that'd be the end of it, right? But that's because you're not a Tennessee state legislator, because that state just passed a bill and its governor signed into law. It's SB 2063, and it bans, quote, the intentional injection, release, or dispersion by any means of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus within the borders of the state into the atmosphere with the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of the sunlight.
Apparatus. There'll be no Brazil mirrors here. Not in this good Christian state.
We will get to apparatus because it's even better than that, right? So look, in any piece of legislation, it's typical to have whereas clauses at the beginning, right? Like they don't have any legal effect, but they document why the legislature's doing this thing, right? As well as some of the key fact findings. So here, the very first whereas clause deliberately lies about that OSTP report that I just mentioned, right? So here's what Tennessee says about it. Whereas it is documented that the federal government or other entities acting on the federal government's behalf or at the federal government's request may conduct geoengineering experiments by intentionally dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere, and those activities may occur within the state of Tennessee. I mean, May is doing a hell of a lot of heavy lifting.
But you just accuse these people of lying, and I would just like to point out, it is not a lie if you believe it, because you're crazy.
Fair, but the report does not authorize any geoengineering experiments. The report nowhere, I did a Control F, mentions the state of Tennessee, right? And most importantly, cirrus cloud thinning is not why 70 of the Tennessee legislature's 72 Republicans voted for this bill. One voted against and one abstained, right? It is not why the Republican governor signed it into law. No, these people thought that the bill was banning chemtrails.
Okay. Look, I'm not a science major by any stretch of the imagination, but isn't that just like the stuff that comes out of the back of the plane is like condensation or something? I'm not crazy, right? That's what you're talking about. You're talking about like the plane and the blue sky and the white line behind it that's like a cloud or whatnot.
Yeah, you're absolutely, well, sort of. Okay, you're describing contrails, right? Condensation trail, right? Because you're not a crazy person.
Right. Those are real. I have seen them.
Yeah, of course they are, right? But contrails exist. Chemtrails do not. Conspiracy theorists think that those passenger airplanes are, I shit you not, spraying mind-controlling nanobots or chemicals to sterilize the population or control the weather, right? That was actually the plot of a G.I. Joe episode. Multi-parter, by the way.
Sometimes there's stuff in here that's not in the script, you guys, and I'm like, G.I. Joe, what the hell are you talking about? No, it's amazing, and I'm always glad of the interruption, even though I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay, these people have clearly listened to quite a lot of Alex Jones. Obviously, the word apparatus is in there. I think you're saying to cover the nanobots.
And how about we listen to Republican Senator Frank Nicely's reason for his yes vote on the bill? He says, "This will be my wife's favorite bill of the year. She has worried about this, I bet, 10 years. If you look up one day, it'll be clear. Then the next day, it will look like some angels have been playing tic-tac-toe. They're everywhere. I got pictures on my phone with X's right over my house. For years, they denied they were doing anything."
Yes.
And he's not wrong that, the government has denied that it has a secret plan to use commercial airliners to spray mind-controlling nanobots on Tennesseans.
Yeah, no, I mean, I suspect that they deny it because it's crazy.
Yeah, and in a clear case of, subtlety does not work on these people, one of the 21... I imagine beleaguered Democrats in the Tennessee state legislature, a guy named Johnny Ray Clemens, moved to amend the bill to add the phrase, which may threaten the Sasquatch and its natural habitat to the list of banned things. And after he introduced the amendment, he started getting questions about Sasquatch habitat. So he had to say out loud, look, I'm being sarcastic. What he said was, I did not intend for my amendment to be taken seriously, and I will move to withdraw it. But I don't think we should take this bill seriously either, and you should withdraw it, which did not happen.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you a question. I'm seeing that this bill goes into effect on July 1st, but I don't think it's going to stop planes from flying over the state of Tennessee, which means that there will still be contrails in the sky on July 2nd. There will not be chemtrails because those are not real. So I'm wondering, though, what Senator Nicely's wife and the rest of the constituents who agitated for this extremely important measure will think when they look up in the sky and see that the angels are still playing tic-tac-toe with the weather dominator nanobot.
Yeah. And look, that actually ties into the larger point I wanted to make in this segment. Right? This is not just making fun of Tennessee Republicans. Sure. It's about how laws are interpreted, and specifically how the now ascendant right-wing dogma that, we may talk about in a soon-to-come future episode that, all courts need to do is look up the plain dictionary meaning of each word in order to figure out what the law means. Like, that's not how real legislators really write bills, right? So let's take this law, for example, right? As a matter of Tennessee state law, it is now illegal to disperse any chemical into the air for purposes of affecting temperature. So, Liz, have you seen those little water bottle fans?
I went to summer camp. Yes.
Yeah, I helpfully dropped a picture of some into the.
No, I know because 8 years sleepaway camp.
Yeah, look, those things disperse dihydrogen monoxide, H2O, into the atmosphere for the express, nay, the sole purpose of affecting temperature. To cool yourself down, you spray. And I promise you, nobody will ever interpret this law that way, even though it is not just an application of the plain meaning. It's the most obvious example of the plain meaning of the words, right? Because that actually is chemicals being sprayed into the air. Because everybody knows this is the anti-chemtrails law, right? Which we know from the testimony of the people who wrote it and who voted for and against it.
Okay, that is it for us today. If you are a Patreon, stick around for a story about Florida crawling into bed with Alex Jones. Cannot wait for that one. And for everybody else, we will see you on Friday for an interview with law professor Steve Vladeck to discuss his book on the Supreme Court's shadow docket. Thank you so much for your support, and we will see you in a few days. See you guys.
Law and Chaos Podcast is a production of Raise Ipsa Media, LLC, is intended solely as entertainment, does not constitute legal advice, and does not form an attorney-client relationship. This show is researched and written by Liz Dye and produced by Bryce Blankenagel. Law and Chaos Pod, copyright 2024, Raise Ipsa Media, LLC, all rights reserved.